Welcome back to iteration 3 of the cs161 tutorial. In this iteration, we're going to have the following objectives. First, we're going to add the reception packages component to the GUI, modifying iDo catering GUI to add an additional panel. Secondly, we're going to modify reception plan to incorporate a data member for the selected reception package. And thirdly, we're going to run the program again and verify the correct GUI display and event handling are performed. With respect to our design, we're going to completely implement the reception packages panel and its associated event handler, the radio button listener. We're also going to partially address the services panel view component, adding that to the iDo catering GUI. And as I said, we're going to add a data member to the reception plan. With respect to our assignment requirements, we're again going to partially satisfy the design of the reception plan by adding one more data member. We're also going to have to update the init method of this reception plan to reinitialize that data member. We're going to add the services panel class. We're only going to partially implement it. We're only going to have one associated JPanel, the one that's going to contain the radio buttons. So it's only going to populate that one panel, and it's only going to invoke a method on that one panel when it needs to be reset. And the panel that we're going to add to the services panel is the reception packages panel. So we're going to address all these kind of design requirements. So as all view classes, it's going to hold a reference to the reception plan, and it's going to define data members for each of the radio buttons, and we're going to have 3 of those. We're going to use the constructor to create and populate that panel. We're going to make sure that when the GUI is first displayed, as well as whenever the user resets it, we'll have the standard radio button selected, and then we'll instantiate an event handler for it, an instance of the radio button listener, and it's going to listen for events from each of those radio buttons. Associated with that view class is going to be its controller class, the radio button listener. It's going to implement the action listener interface, and what it's going to do is whenever one of those radio buttons is selected, we're going to set the corresponding member of the reception plan to an appropriate value, indicating either standard, deluxe, or premium package selected. The GUI requirements addressed are the following. Okay, for the packages component event handling, well, whenever the user selects one of the package options, as I mentioned, the program is going to record its associated code. All right, so this gives us direction on how we have to implement that data member. So it looks like it's going to be a single character. S for standard, D for deluxe, P for premium. And we're also going to address the additional functionality implied by reset. Okay, when that reset button is pressed, we got to make sure we go ahead and also change reception plan to indicate that standard is selected. That's the default. So the technical requirements we're going to address, well, the reception packages panel has to be configured with a grid layout. So we're going to lay out those radio buttons in basically a 1-column grid. And we're going to also group them together so that the user can only select one radio button at a time. So we'll use a button group for those. The reception packages panel has to also instantiate a single radio button listener, and that radio button listener has to be declared, like our other listeners, as an inner class. And it's got to implement the action listener interface with the action performed method. Okay, given that introduction, we'll now switch over to Eclipse so we can develop the code. Well, here I brought up our Eclipse project. First thing we'll do is we're going to address the modifications needed by our model class reception plan. What we're going to have to do is add one new data member to hold the package selection. And from our design, we know that that's got to be a character, and we'll call that reception package. And we'll allow Eclipse to generate for us the setters and getters for reception package. And let's place that let's put it right after our constructor. Okay, we now have to modify the code for init to reinitialize reception package to indicate that the standard package was selected. That's the character S. And I also want to make sure, with respect to debugging, that I'm not only going to display adults and children, I'll also display the contents of the reception package. Okay, strictly for debugging purposes. Now we're finished with the modifications to reception plan. Let's now go over and work on the view and controller classes we're going to add. So we've got the reception package panel. Reception packages panel. And we know, first of all, it too must extend JPanel. We'll bring that in. Okay, we said this is going to have 3 radio buttons. So let's declare those as data members here. We're going to have one for each of the possible packages. So we got standard, we got deluxe, and we have premium. We also need to declare a data member to hold a reference to our reception plan. All right, let's go ahead and import the radio button class. Now we know all the work's going to be done here in our constructor. So let's get started on that. And the constructor is going to be configured with the reception plan. We'll send that in as a parameter. So we'll save that. Okay, let's also, at this point, let's go ahead and configure our layout. it's going to be a grid layout. And I'm going to make it have 5 rows and 1 column. I'm just going to have it have a little bit of space. It only really needs 3, but I'm going to configure it with 5. Okay, it is titled packages, so we're going to need a border. So I'll put that in here next. And that's simply named packages. Alright, so we defined those 2 properties. Now let's go ahead and instantiate our radio buttons. And they're all going to look alike. Got to get the labels correctly here. Standard. I'm just going to copy and paste these. And we'll modify the dollar amounts here. Alright, so now we instantiated the buttons. Now what I want to do is I want to add these to a button group. So let's create our button group. And import that. Okay, then I just need to add those buttons. I'm going to add all 3 in the same way. Alright, so I got my button group there defined. Now I'm going to add those buttons also to the panel. The last thing I need to do is I need to add a listener to these buttons. So I need to define that as an inner class. So we're going to create our radio button listener now. Okay, so what do we need to do? And it's action perform method. Well, we need to know, okay, what radio button was selected. So since any three of them could have generated the selection event, what we need to do is once again ask, what's the source of this event? And I'd like to change that to E for event. So if it's our standard event, well, okay, ask the model, hey, model, you need to set your reception package to S. All right, well, if it's not standard, maybe it's deluxe. So we'll ask if it's deluxe, then we'll set it to D. Otherwise, I'm going to make an assumption that we've selected premium. Set it to P. All right, so that takes care of our controller now communicating to the model that it's got to make some necessary changes. But the other thing we need to attend to here is the fact that when the user clicks the reset button, one of the things that's going to be reset is the reception package. No matter what it was before, it's going to be reset to S. And then our reception plan is going to make an invocation of the I do catering GUI, and it's going to say, hey, you need to reset the GUI, and the reception package radio button needs to be reset back to an S. Okay, so we got to make sure we take care of that when we wire up our buttons here. All right, so let's wire up the buttons, and then we'll work on doing the reset. So the first thing we need to do is we need to, I'm going to create an instance of radio button listener. And then just add it to my buttons. Simple as that. And now we'll attend to the necessity to effect the reset. So reset here just means I got to make sure that our default button is selected, and the default button is the standard one. So we're going to make our changes to the display by telling that button you are selected. And there we go. All right, let's save that. Now this panel is a child of the services panel. So we also need to create the services panel. It also extends JPanel. And the services panel is going to have a reference to its child panel or its child view, the reception packages panel. And let's see what I call that. reversed. Sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time here. Alright, so there we go. Data member. Okay. It's also going to have a reference to the model. And just like all views, all the work's going to be done in its constructor. And it will also need one argument to do that, and then we know that this has to have a flow layout, so we'll take care of that. And now, okay, what are its GUI components? Well, the GUI components for the services panel are actually going to be three other panels. We need the reception packages panel. On the left hand side, in the middle are going to be the reception options panel, and on the right hand side, reception charges panel. So the services panel is really a container for other panels, and it itself is contained within the iDo Catering GUI. Okay, so as I mentioned before, when we first talked about design, this GUI design is hierarchic. And hierarchic simply means we have views contained within views. So we're going to instantiate our reception packages panel, and we have to send it the plan, and then we simply add this to the services panel. Now it also has to implement a version of reset. And this is required by the hierarchic nature of how we're implementing the view. So here again is what happens. When the user presses the reset button, reset method is going to be called on the model reception plan. Reception plan is going to reset its data members, and then it's going to call the reset method on the top level view, which is iDo Catering GUI. iDo Catering GUI then is going to delegate reset to its child views. One of its child views is services panel. So that's why services panel needs to have a reset method. This is going to be called by the iDo Catering GUI. And all we're doing here is we're going to ask its child panel to reset. Okay, and we've already implemented that method. And we know that that reset method, what it does is it selects the standard radio button. All right, so there's the implementation of the services panel. Now we just need to go up to the top level view, and we need to add the services panel here. So as you see, that our top level GUI, okay, is going to have three children. We got guests at the top, and the middle is going to be services, and then the bottom is going to be actions. All right, so I'm just going to go here and do the same thing I did before with the guest panel. Oh, again, my tongue got ahead of my brain here. The services panel. The services panel. Sorry about that. All right, so now we got three child panels that are members of our top level GUI. And where's the services panel go? Well, in the border layout, the services panel is going to go in the middle, and that's the border layout center position. All right, so that takes care of constructing the GUI, but we also have to come down here and we got to attend to this. Now let's look at reset first. I know that when reset's requested, I got to make sure that all my panels get reset appropriate. So we got to do the services panel as well as the guest panel here. All right, so I'm going to do that. And then, since a user interaction can cause a change in the model, I got to make sure that change gets communicated. That is, the reception plan is properly populated before I try to compute all the charges. Okay, so up here, when I display that plan, I should also get a display of the reception package value. So I will look at, let's see, number of guests, adults, children, and I should also get the package now. All right, so I think I've gotten all the code in place. Let's now give this a test. Oh, I see one problem immediately, and I think this is because of cut and paste. See all these buttons here? They're all labeled the same. So let's go take care of that right away. See, it's kind of nice. I didn't add too much code, so I can track it down pretty quickly. I know who's responsible for generating that part of the GUI. I know that's the reception packages panel. It's one of the beauties of iterative development. They tend to be fairly simple to debug. All right, so here we go again. All right, so now I got the correct labels. I do notice one other thing that I am going to have to attend to really satisfy the requirements of the GUI. See on these labels, I got an open paren here, but I don't have the closed paren. Of course, that would be kind of marked off if you turned this in, because it doesn't exactly subscribe to the requirements of GUI content. In the meantime, let's go ahead and enter some adults. Let's enter some children. And oh, look at this. I noticed here I don't have anything selected at the beginning. That doesn't seem correct. Shouldn't standard be selected at the beginning? We're going to have to take care of that. So you see in this button group, only one button can be selected at a time. All right, let's click on apply and see what we got. All right, down here, you see you got the correct number of adults, correct number of children, and reception package is a D. All right, let's try P. Can we get the P? There's the P. Let's try reset now. Okay, everything gets reset correctly, and also note that the package gets reset back to standard. So it looks like we're pretty close. The only thing we need to do is ensure that when the GUI comes up, that we've got everything reset. So that is, when the GUI comes up, our button here should be selected. So one way to do that is when we create this, we can just call reset. All right, so let's try that. All right, and you see, there we go. Okay, so that does it for iteration 3.